Bethesda games have been popular for a long time now. For a really long time now. As long as I can imagine, Bethesda have had an amazing reputation for putting out amazing open world RPGs with these massive, deep and interesting locations to explore. Personally, I was absolutely obsessed with pretty much everything Bethesda has put out since Skyrim, even Fallout Shelter. Yeah, there was that weird little blip before that 76, but their quality is consistently great. So why is Starfield, Bethesda's new IP, just so bad? After almost 2 years of patches and its first DLC pack, it's just still boring. So why do Bethesda games work while Starfield doesn't? And like I said, I've always really liked Bethesda games, even through all of their messiness and glitches. When I was younger, I was absolutely obsessed with Skyrim, and for years it was the only thing I played, even though I was on the awful PS3 version, so I've since played every single Skyrim version that's released after. But even as a 10-year-old kid, I could still work out how to exploit the game's dodgy AI just by standing on the edge of the boss fight room, where the enemies would just stop chasing you. Obviously since then I've followed Bethesda games, spent hundreds of hours playing Fallout 4, New Vegas, most recently the Oblivion remake. And the Oblivion remake has obviously sparked my interest in Bethesda again. I tried playing the old Oblivion before, but a lot of the ugliness and clunkiness from that game just pushed me away from it. But now, playing the remake has really got me into it, just like I was with Skyrim and the Fallout games before it. Even though it somehow still has all of the messiness that Bethesda games have always had.
How are you?
Great.
How's business? Are things going well?
Yes.
So long.
You too.
Like, every time you walk outside of the building, all the textures load in about a second after you load into the world. Almost like it's rushing to put its clothes on as you walk in the room. So what is it about these games that just keeps on pulling me in? For most people, they're playing RPGs for the storylines. But in Bethesda games, most of the storylines, and the main story especially, usually pretty boring and predictable. Maybe it's just me, but most of the time during the cutscenes of an Elder Scrolls game, I'm just spamming spells to power level. I mean, the main story of every Elder Scrolls game is you leave a prison, have to stop a generic world-ending threat, while the main story of every Fallout game is you leave a vault and have to save a lost person from the vault. Basically, the main story in these games are just there to have you travel across almost every corner of the map, so you see all the cities and meet the different factions. Pretty much the entirety of the main story is there, just to encourage you to explore the world and get sidetracked with all the random bullshit you can find. Which makes it really weird to me that they make the motivations for the protagonists so urgent, when they really just want you to run around everywhere and explore. With most games, I'm usually playing them for the moment-to-moment gameplay, which in Bethesda games would be their combat. But I don't think their combat has ever really been that interesting or exciting. Yeah, there's always a variety of methods and weapons to fight with, but I usually end up gravitating towards the one that leads me to actually fighting the least. In Fallout, I've always gone for the high charisma and intelligence builds where I can usually talk my way out of combat, or kill the other person before I even get into combat. And whenever I play an Elder Scrolls game, I'm always using all of the magic and stealth I possibly can to not fight myself. Usually just offloading it to my summons with Conjuration, or throwing fireballs from a mile away. Well, this sort of rule has applied for every Bethesda game I've played, except for Fallout 4, which is one of their most recent and most hated games. But unlike most people, this was my first Fallout game. I've absolutely loved it since its release. The perk system in this game combines with VATS, opens up the options for so many different combat styles. Like, you can make yourself into a gunslinger where you just VATS critical headshot everyone. You can do some stealthy sniping or melee. You can cover yourself with some massive power armor and just charge around carrying heavy artillery. There's just so many options, you're always going to find something to suit you. Which leads us to the first and probably the most glaring issue that Starfield has. It's combat, which on the surface seems very similar to Fallout 4. There's loads of different weapons, with a lot of variety between them, and they even decided to add really good weapon modifications to Fallout 4. But because it's not a Fallout game, there's obviously no VAT system, which for some reason meant they also removed all of the limb targeting and weaknesses, which in the end just makes enemies feel less reactive and even dumber than they have in previous Bethesda games. Combat related perks in Starfield are also just really boring and bland. They're all just percentage boosts to damage for certain class of weapons. There's none of the fun stuff that can actually change how you play, just gives you more damage. But that damage increase is very necessary in Starfield, because all of these enemies just feel so very bullet spongy. And to get the high level of these perks, you need to complete challenges with those weapons. So you're really encouraged to only use one weapon type for the entirety of the game, and you're punished for experimenting, weakened for using any other types. Starfield's story is also really boring. At the start, you touch a rock, see some visions, which means there's some random group is interested in you. Then they encourage you to travel around all of these planets just doing random odd jobs for them. Nothing really happens. Obviously the main story of this game doesn't really matter, like any other Bethesda games. It's still just there to push you to explore more of the map and find other stuff. But the issue is that travelling around Starfield's world is a complete and utter chore. For some reason, in this game which is heavily revolved around your spaceship, space exploration, you for some reason cannot fly from planet to planet. Taking off from a planet is a cutscene, landing your spaceship is a cutscene, and you have to initiate all of this from a pause menu. There's absolutely none of the organic walk anywhere in a straight line and you'll find something interesting sort of exploration that you can quite easily find in both the Elder Scrolls and Fallout series. Obviously, because that's just something you cannot do. You cannot travel from one end of the map to the other. You cannot just walk straight through this map and find some bandit camps to fight, abandoned buildings to explore, and general things to do. There's all of these loading screens and menus between all the planets that actually have the main gameplay and exploration on them. Then, even when you touch down onto a planet, most of them are just barren wastelands. Because most of the planet surfaces in Starfield are procedurally generated. A lot of times this isn't really a bad thing. There's plenty of games that use procedural generation well, to generate things like levels and dungeons. But Starfield just randomly made fields of nothing, with the occasional handmade interesting thing dotted around. It just makes exploration feel pointless, because most of the time there's just nothing there. Starfield's exploration is just so empty compared to the deep and interesting worlds in all of Bethesda's other games. There's absolutely none of the random cool events that can pop up when you're travelling in Skyrim or Fallout, because you spend the whole time in menus and cutscenes. It's pretty clear that they recognise that this awful exploration was an issue in Starfield, because they changed it up in the DLC. Bethesda DLC is almost always really fun, and usually pretty game breaking as well, like the Ben Will shout in Skyrim, or making your own custom robots in Fallout 4 and just giving them loads of fire swords and head lasers. But in Starfield, they instead just decided that this DLC would just be a normal Bethesda style planet to explore, which was a bit too late to save Starfield now. It may have been Bethesda's biggest open world, which was obviously all over the marketing, but Starfield has nowhere near the most interesting world they've made. Bethesda games work because of their deep, dynamic and exciting open worlds, and Starfield doesn't. It's just menu after cutscene after menu, travel around all of the samey, empty, boring planets. If you like this video, it would be cool if you watch another one, or just like and subscribe. Cheers.